Revelation 12:11 says, "And they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony." Welcome to the Word of Their Testimony podcast. Well, thank you so much, Gretchen, for being here today. I'm super excited to be talking with you in person because up until now, our relationship has consisted mostly just of Instagram chatting here and there. So I'm actually trying to figure out how I even found you on Instagram, but I'm glad I did. And it's been cool to just witness your journey and, hear about where you've been and where you are now, and to see you so on fire for the Lord. And you just have such a fun, spunky personality, I guess you would say. And yeah, I just thank you so much for being here. And I would just love to learn more about what God's done in your life to take you from where you are to where you are now.
Yeah. Well, I think it kind of all starts back and from my past. So I'm sober, and I've been sober for 12 years as of this month.
Yes. Congratulations.
I know. I hit my dozen.
That's awesome.
But, prior to me getting sober, I was a heroin addict, and I still identify kind of as an alcoholic because I didn't drink normally, but alcohol always made me do drugs. It didn't make me. I wanted to do drugs when I drank. So for over a decade, I was, on drugs, and I was drinking, and, obviously I did not have any spiritual life whatsoever or relationship with God. But my family, so I was raised Catholic. Another set of my grandparents were Christians. So growing up, I would go to church with them. So I had a little bit of a foundation, I guess, to the church was and what Jesus was. And when I was strung out, my grandparents would pray for me all the time. I feel like my grandma's got a direct connection with God. She's the holiest lady I know. She's also the coolest lady I know. And so I always knew that they were praying for me. And it was just I always kind of put that, just honestly, I had I wouldn't say anger. I was just upset because I was kind of taught that God had this plan for us. So I was always really confused and upset as to why his plan, I don't know, I'm gonna cry, was to make me a junkie. Why did I was the chosen one to become a heroin addict? And so I had this deep resentment towards him for the longest time because I just didn't understand. And now I do. He didn't make me a junkie, but now I get to share my testimony of overcoming addiction, and there's a reason why. But at the time I didn't understand, and I was just angry and upset and resentful. And it wasn't until I got sober. Actually, what's funny is I was waiting tables at Kirby Lane. Maybe a month before I got sober, this table asked if they could pray for me. And it was out of nowhere. It's kind of in Austin in the middle of a restaurant. It's not normal there to do that. And I allowed this lady to pray for me, standing up, waiting on them at Kirby Lane. And it felt weird, but I was you know what, I'm going to do it. This feels nice. And that was kind of the first moment of wow, this feels good. And when I got sober, my sponsor at the time, because I did get sober through AA, I was in AA then. Now I'm stay sober through Jesus. My sponsor at the time was actually, Christian, and she was going to church, and, I wasn't against it, but I was still I'm a spiritual person. I pray to Mother Earth and the universe and all of that jazz. I decided to go to church with her one day, and I didn't enjoy it. One bit, but I tried, and I was okay. And another seed was planted in me, well, that wasn't so bad, but it's not my thing.
Right.
And then I met my husband. Well, he was my boyfriend at the time. And I became friends with his sister on Instagram, and she was super Christian, and she kind of made it look cool. At this point, I was 3 years sober, and there was kind of a deeper yearning. There's only so much spirituality you can get from praying to Mother Earth,
Yeah.
You can't really get deep. And I was wanting more. And so my husband actually went to Bible college back in the day.
Oh, no way.
So he was no longer a practicing Christian either, but we kind of were both just in this, we don't know what we want phase. And so when we moved to Nevada after we got married, we decided that we were going to go to church. Just try it. We're just going to go to this church we heard that was cool. And so we went. And we're that wasn't bad. We kind of liked it. And so then we kept going. And then I got pregnant with my daughter. And that kind of was well, I want my child to have a foundation to grow up on, especially since like my past was so like wild. And my husband's father was, he's sober now too, but my husband's father also has like, alcoholism. And so it was like, there's this gene in our family. And it was like, well, I really want my children now, but child then to have this like foundation to grow up on and like a faith to lean on. And so we just kept going. We liked it a lot. And I remember one day looking at my husband when someone was getting baptized, and I told him, I said, I will never do that. And he was like, oh yeah, me neither. Don't worry. And we were moving back to Texas, and we both looked at each other and we were like, well, this was like months later. And he was like, well, should we get baptized before we leave? And I was like, yeah, I think we should. It was like, and we're laughing because we had just vowed like, months before we were like, we're never doing that. And in January 2017, I was pregnant with my daughter. We got baptized basically as a little family because she was in my belly.
Aww.
And we've kind of just like, we started there and we got baptized, and then we kept going to church. We're like kind of nomads. We move a lot. I'm sure you've noticed off of Instagram. We're like packing up and moving cross country. So we did that again. We packed up and we moved to Texas, and we had a hard time finding a church at first. And then, we found a church in Texas. And then, of course, we decided we're going to pack up and move cross country again. And that was kind of like when COVID hit. And so it was kind of rough. Like churches weren't open. We were having a hard time. Like the church that we went to in Nevada at the time was very different, and kind of just had to like rely on our own faith. Like I think that's kind of when I've learned that like you don't necessarily have to go to church to have this like deep connection with God. You can just have that on your own, because for the longest time we never actually found a church again when we lived in Nevada for that 4 years. We just kind of floated from church to church, like trying to like different ones, but they weren't really like our values. The churches are a little different in the West Coast.
Yeah.
And they didn't really align with our values. And so we would like, no, we're not just going to go just to go.
Right.
It wasn't until we like moved to Oklahoma that we really got this deep, deep connection with God and like got really connected.
Yeah.
Connected with the church. Like my husband plays on the worship team and I'm on like the women's ministry team. And it's just kind of like been, I don't know, it seems like a long journey, and sometimes like doubt myself. I have like this insecurity since like I still feel like I'm like a new Christian, even though it's been like since 2017, but like I'm like one of those people that have never read the Bible fully, and like I don't know all the Bible verses, and sometimes I feel like my faith isn't as like worthy because I don't know these things. So it's like a struggle that I have, but it's also like my own insecurities. I know it's not true. These are just thoughts I tell myself.
Right.
But it's been like, it is. It really is. And, and like I went through like the whole like manifestation phase just up until like probably like 6 months ago was I like, no, what am I doing? Like, this isn't real. Like, this is me trying to like control my own life.
Yeah.
Like putting all this faith in myself. Like, even though I believed in God and Jesus, but I needed to have control of my own outcome. And it's like when I finally let all of that go, honestly, like everything just felt like it was really falling into place,
It's hard to let go of control, especially as an addict. I know from experience.
It is, but it's like, it's been freeing, and it's been cool to see, like, I have these progressions of my faith. It started at one point, and like each little point, I'm like letting something else go, or I'm doing something more trusting, and my faith is a little bit stronger. It's like, I'm not going to get baptized. Oh, I'm going to get baptized. And then it's like, I just want to go to church. I don't want to like be connected. Oh, I'm like fully connected. And then it's like, oh, I'm going to be the master of my own reality through manifestation. And it's like, no, actually you're not. Jesus is, and you're going to let that go. So it's kind of been like a really, really cool progression.
Yeah.
Especially over these last 12 years of just seeing where I was, like, some junkie, to like being a suburban mom, Christian mom. It's like I'm like two different people now. And like I always laugh, like, man, because I have friends still in Austin, and they're very different than me and my values and my beliefs, and I always wonder what they think of me now. Like we're still friends, but I don't ever have the guts to like ask them, like, What do you think of this version of me?
Oh, I love it. I love it. Yeah, and I feel like that's how it's been with me too. Like it's been a gradual progression over time. And I was just talking to somebody on the last podcast where he said that like God has two speeds. Sometimes he'll just come in and just radically change everything overnight. And then sometimes, it's a progression, like you were saying. Like he slowly is like meeting you where you're at. And then things that you said, oh, I would never do that. Then God works on your heart and then you end up doing it. And then
Yeah.
you end up moving forward. And that's been my experience too. God is slowly convicting me of things. And there's a lot of weird things that somehow work their way into like Christian culture that you find out, oh, maybe that's not exactly the right thing, and then
Yeah.
you like get back on the path. But I love seeing all your posts about how much you love your church and how active you are in your church community, and how like I just see it seems very genuine, it seems very rooted in Jesus. And I would love to hear about the difference between those years that you were kind of drifting without a church community, and then like how you are now having your family like firmly planted in a church community, and the difference that that's made.
Yeah. Okay. Well, when we were drifting, it was just more or less because like we just didn't feel connected. And like some of the churches that we went to were like really big. And sometimes you get lost in big churches. Like you're
Mm-hmm.
just, you're just there. And then like some of the other ones were like, we just can't get behind like the values or whatever. And so what's
Okay.
really funny is like before we moved, I was just on Instagram. And I like hashtagged OKC church and was like looking on Instagram, and I like found this one church and I just was like, oh, these people look cool. They look happy. And my husband had listened to some like sermons from some other churches here, and he wasn't like, I don't know about it. And I was like, let's just go to this church. It looks cool. Like these people, like they look young, they look fun. Let's just try it out. And like the church is a very small church. And we went that one time, like we moved here on a Thursday, we went to church on a Sunday, and we never left that church.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it's small. It's a church plant. They've been open. Is that what you said? They've been open. You've been around for like 3 years now. So it
Okay.
is still like very small. It's growing pretty fast though. It was kind of like we got a church family, and we got friends too. Like we didn't know anyone here when we moved here. And we knew one person, my hairstylist, who I've known since I was 19. But like that was it. So it was like, okay, these people are really nice. They are really young. Like Jason and I are kind of like the oldest people there, but whatever. That's okay.
I mean, like, I honestly thought you were younger than what you were, so I think it's
a
fine.
lot of people do. I think it's because I'm short. But like we got connected because we homeschool. So, how are my kids going to find friends? And it's like, well, now they have like all these friends, and, their kids ministry program is like top notch. Like my kids asked to pray, and like we experienced our first tornado, take shelter. And my daughter, like the first thing she said was, Mommy, can you just pray? And
Oh,
it's
I
like,
love
they wouldn't
that.
have those. They wouldn't know this stuff if it wasn't for like being in church and like having this like awesome kids ministry. And it's like, it's great to see them like understanding and asking questions and wanting to pray and like asking like, well, like they're so confused when other people don't believe in Jesus, because it's just like the norm here. Like that's just what we
Right.
talk about. I don't have anything really to compare it to because they were such littles before.
Mm-hmm.
But I know like having that foundation now is so solid. It's going to make, heavier conversations later down the road just a little bit easier, or heartaches and, breakups, like being able to weave Jesus into all of that will just,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like will be a little bit softer on their, on their hearts.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. I totally forgot that you homeschool too. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I homeschool my daughter as well. And did your faith play into that decision to homeschool?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just again like the schools. A lot of the things that they teach don't align with our values.
Mm-hmm.
And then it kind of was like we had my daughter. She had got accepted into this like charter science academy for
Mm-hmm.
kindergarten. She never started. I was like, that Uvalde shooting happened.
Mm.
I was already on like I don't know if I really want to put her in school, like kind of just teetering back and forth. And then that happened. And I was like, nope, we're done. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to
Yeah.
learn school again. So,
Yes.
but the majority of it is, yeah, I just don't align with what they teach. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
want to, here it comes. I want to have control. I want to have control over what my kids learn. But
Yeah.
that's in a healthy way. I'm not trying to be controlling. I just
Right.
don't think that their little minds need to learn some of the stuff that's out there.
I completely agree. That's that's
I'm like,
awesome.
oh, dang, do I have control issues?
I have another question for you. So,
Okay.
how long would you say you were in active addiction? Because you've been sober for 12 years now, so that's quite a while.
Yes.
But
Okay. Well, I actually started using drugs at a very, very long age or early age.
okay.
So by the time I was like 15, I was at an outpatient rehab for cocaine. But that's not like the drug that took me down. Like I've always been a partier. I was going to
Hmm.
raves when I was in high school, doing ecstasy, ketamine, and LSD and all of that. But
Right.
when I was 20, I tried heroin, and that's what took me out.
Hmm.
So, like, addiction, like almost 10 years, because I got sober when I was 29 and a half, because I was going to start my 30s fresh, a new decade.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
But, like, I had like a very long history of partying.
Hmm.
So, I guess you could say since I was 15.
So, what brought you to that point of like being ready to finally quit?
Well, I had tried to get sober multiple times before. I almost lasted a year one time, and then I drank because I told myself I wasn't an alcoholic,
Hmm.
that I was only an addict. And that night I had a needle in my arm. So I quickly learned that
Yeah.
was a lie. But I had one of my best friends who we used for 10 years together. She got sober before me. And I had actually got her a job at Kirby Lane. And like my best friend was a train wreck. School was a mess. But she had been sober for like 18 months. And like I was like watching her because I got her a job there. So I got to see her every day. Because like she wouldn't
Hmm.
hang out with me, obviously, for obvious reasons. I get it. So I got to see her every day and I got to see her life transform and how happy she was. And like, oh my gosh, like she's doing it. And I remember telling myself, gosh, if she can do it, so can I.
Yeah.
And she's the one that kind of put the thought in my head too, like you get to start your 30s a whole new decade. And like that stuck with me. I was like, oh, this is like a fresh start, a whole new decade. And so on July 4th, she took me to a meeting because I was like, okay, let's do it. And then she like babysat me just day in and day out for weeks and weeks to make
Wow.
sure I was okay. And then it just stuck. She's still sober. I'm still sober.
Wow. And then you never went to NA, you were more of an AA girl?
Okay, so the joke is that you go to NA to meet a dealer and you go to AA to recover.
Okay, okay. I went to NA like one time. I was more of an AA person myself. So,
Yeah. I think I liked the old schoolness of AA better.
mhm.
Like it was a little bit more rough and like, I don't know. And I did that for 3 years and then I just kind of outgrew it.
Mhm.
Honestly, when I started going to church, it wasn't like I'm stopping AA. It just happened. I started
Mhm.
going to church. I started feeling really good. I just never went back.
Yeah, that's interesting like because well, I quit drinking 5 years ago. Well, almost 5 years. It's not
Yay.
quite 5 years. It'll be 5 in September, but and then I went to AA for about a year and that was a great lifeline for me in the beginning.
Yes.
So that was 2019. It's interesting now that I think about it. It was around the time because 2020 was when everything like shook up in my world and in AA like they had told me, you know, you need to have a higher power. So I had like just higher power or whatever. And then eventually like
Yeah.
I did have like this spiritual experience and it became like the one true God to me, but I was very against like Jesus and all that. I was also raised Catholic and I just kind of associated Jesus with like religion and guilt and shame. And so I was just like, no, I got God and that's good. But then COVID happened and, you know, I had a lot of time to like contemplate life and God told me you need to get to know Jesus. And it was interesting because it was around, I was still going to AA, but it was like, then I finally started to get more into Jesus. And then I kind of felt, you know what? I don't really like AA is no longer serving me. And
Yeah.
so I
It just
kind of, yeah, I just stopped
outgrowed it.
going. Yeah. And It was interesting because it was like for a time it was really, really good for me, and it was like I needed it, but then I felt like it kind of kept me stuck in the same story. And,
100%.
I was like
I feel that.
identifying, like, it's like, hi, I'm Corinne, I'm an alcoholic. And you had to say
Yeah.
that like every time. And, that's not what I want to identify as the rest of my life. There was one time I did go, because I got sober in Indiana, but now I live in Austin. And there was one time I checked out a meeting here. I don't know why. I just felt like it. And, but it felt weird. It's interesting now though, because I do go to a recovery meeting. It's actually at my church, and it's not like AA at all, like at all.
Is it Celebrate Recovery?
No, no,
Oh.
it's completely its own thing. So like no
Oh,
12
that's cool.
steps. Yeah. My pastor at the church created it, and it's amazing. And I go to it every Monday, and it's very like biblical based, and we don't like say our name or like what our addiction is or any of that. So like half the people that I go to the meeting with, I don't even know what they're in recovery from.
Oh,
But
that's cool.
yeah, and it's really neat. And it's like you don't even have to like be an addict or an alcoholic. Like you could be in recovery from like depression or codependency or just like any random thing. It doesn't have to be like a substance. And it just really teaches you like kind of like how to live and biblical principles. And it's incredible. It's amazing. And I really vibe with that because it just coincides with like the identity in Christ that I have now. And I just think it's interesting that you had the kind of the same experience where AA just kind of like wasn't really doing it anymore. But then Jesus, Jesus is the ultimate healer, and he can do far more than a group that kind of keeps you stuck in your past. So I think that's kind of cool that you had the same experience.
I actually had a lot of shame around not going to AA for a while, and I didn't talk about it because I was scared because like, the people that I went to AA with, always kind of told me that if I quit going to AA, I was going to either end up dead or in jail. So I had these thoughts that like, oh my gosh. And then it was like, okay, well, I quit going. So now they're going to think I'm not sober.
Right.
Oh my God. Yeah. Oh my God.
I thought that too. Yeah.
the things we tell ourselves, I'm like, who cares? But like, I was like, and then I was afraid to share because I was like, well, what if I'm different? Like, what if I have this very unique situation and then I start sharing about it and someone tries it and then they relapse and like, it's my fault. So I had all these like really hard mixed emotions about sharing that I quit going to AA and that I just started going to church. But then one day, I don't know, I think it was during 2020, honestly, I just kind of was like, I just had this moment of who cares? This is your story. Everyone's recovery is different, and you're allowed to have a different recovery than your friends in AA in Austin, So I just started speaking a little bit more vocal about that, and then like vocal about the church. And then now it's just normal. It's like everyday conversation.
I know. It's crazy to like, to be in one phase of your life and accumulate friends in that certain phase, and then you transform, and then it's like you're this new person now, and it's like, okay, like how's it gonna work with me being this way? But it's well, and really cool thing about my church is we went to this thing called Pastor with a Pizza. And so you got to like hear the pastor's story and like where, all of that. And like, so my church, and I didn't know this, I didn't pick it. I think the Lord picked it for me. The majority of my church is sober. My pastor's a recovering heroin addict. His wife is sober. I mean, like, we're sober there. And I'm like, this is so cool. Like, these are my people. That's awesome. So my pastor is also a recovering alcoholic, and he's sober. Yeah, it's so helpful to have.
It is. It like takes a
community.
level of shame off of you. Like, I'm not this like, even though I know we're not perfect, but like we still have the enemy, these thoughts in our head, like, oh my gosh, my past is so bad. But when you're actually surrounded by people who have the similar past and they're your pastor, it gives you a level, like a sense of like peace almost.
Right.
Like, look at them. It's okay.
Exactly. And that's why it's so good to like share our stories and share where we've been and what we've gone through, because you don't know who's over there in the sidelines like, oh my gosh, like I'm not good enough to be here. Like, look at all these amazing people, because they see like the present moment, but they don't know like what we've been through, like the muck and the mire and the brokenness and where God took us and brought us to where we are now. And I think some churches don't always talk about that, but I think it's really important that we continue to share our story. We continue to share where we've been and what God's done in our lives to bring us to where we are now, because we don't know who that can help, who's over here scared, like, oh, I'm not good enough, but it's like, honestly, none of us are good enough. And God, Jesus makes us good enough. Yeah. Like we're all broken. We're all in need of God's grace and God's mercy. And it's just incredible. Like everybody that he's called in scripture and in life, like I keep hearing, I see these people and I'm like, oh, they're so amazing. And then I hear about their past and I'm like, oh my gosh, like they were not qualified. They were a hot mess, but God took these people and like made them who they are today. And it's just incredible. Like God can take anyone, no matter where you're at, no matter what you've been through or how hot of a mess you are or whatever, like he can take you and he can transform your life for his glory and you can live a life of joy and freedom and peace. And God's so good.
I always feel so grateful. I had such resentment because like, well, why me? And then now it's like, oh, thank you, Jesus. Thank you. It was me. Like I got saved and like I'm here and I get to share. And I know a lot of people will they'll get sober, but they won't ever talk about it. They'll just still live in shame. And it's like, I have this like overwhelming feeling that that's why I'm so vocal, because I'm like, if I can just help one person, then that's meaningful to me. And I will always be very people, I've done a few podcasts before and they're like, just share what you're comfortable with. And I'm like, oh, I'll share it all. Like if it's going to help someone, I'll give you all the details.
Yes. I love that. And I thank you so much for sharing, sister, because I really feel like your story is so powerful and this is definitely going to help someone and just bring some hope to someone out there. And so thank you so much for your time.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
So great to talk with you. And I look forward to seeing more of your journey on Instagram and how the Lord continues to work in your life. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
If you were blessed by this episode, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future testimonies. And if you want to pass on the blessing to others, please leave a review and share to your page. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode.